news from a biblical perspective this week and get back into our book of Romans next week. But we didn't get to finish this, and so many things are happening in the world. The Middle East is aflame. It's kind of interesting. I found a verse in the Old Testament that speaks about the Middle East being aflame in the last days. We'll read that here in just a few minutes. But if you have your pages and you want to go over to page 3, because we covered this last week, Israel is at war. And anyone who's watching the news, and I do know that the news can be depressing if you look at it from a worldly perspective, but if you look at it from the Christian, the biblical perspective, it's an exciting time to be alive because it means that Jesus Christ could come at any time as we're watching the prophecies of the Old and the New Testament come alive right before our very eyes. And if you know the names of these groups and where these groups come from and be able to put it in perspective, if you know who they are. And then another thing that will help you, and I'm trying to make a list of this for next week, is who these nations are. You know, like so many people didn't realize that Mosul, which where the Christians were cast out of last week, was actually Nineveh. In the Old Testament. One of the oldest Christian churches in the world were in Mosul. And then to find out that was Nineveh, and I don't know if anybody watched it this week, but there was a woman who was interviewed from Mosul, and she was just crying her heart out, and she was on one of the news, well, I think it's Fox News, and she was begging America to help the Christians there because they're under such great persecution. In fact, they say now there's not one Christian left in that city of Mosul. That last Saturday, the last Christian was cast out. They crucified 9 men and put them in the middle of State Square, and you can see that if you want to see it on the internet, pictures of the things that's going on over there.
Where?
In Mosul. They also, or Nineveh, biblical Nineveh, and it's in Iraq, but they also decapitated several, and they took their heads and put them on poles, and that's also in the city of Mosul. You know, the world, all the things that's going on in the world, and so many things are being covered up. The smoke, you know, the blue smoke is covering them of all the things that's going on, and the Christians are literally begging for America to help them in many countries where they're being persecuted beyond imagination. And many of them are being cast out of their homes, taking everything that they ever had, and being slaughtered if they don't leave immediately. So we need to be praying for our brothers and sisters in Christ because they are part of us. You know, but it's just kind of, you don't hear it, they're not talking about it. Very seldom you even hear it mentioned of what is actually going on. And yeah, we talk about our borders, and that's a bad scene too. But a lot of those things that are happening that are so explosive right now, many of them came from executive orders that were signed. And there's a few more executive orders about to take place. And this is giving the IRS, that's why I was telling you that they made an agreement, and 3 times, I heard it on the news this week, 3 times, that they made an agreement, the IRS, as much trouble as they're already presumed to be in, but it's kind of hard to have an investigation when the ones who are head of the investigations are part of the crime. I mean, who are you going to, that's kind of strange, but this is where we're at. And that is the confusion and the chaos and the perplexity that the Lord said would come in the last days just before He returned. Because you look at it and go, what? What happened to the Constitution? What happened to the rights of people? You know, and you look at that and go, wow, this can't happen. This just really cannot happen. But guess what? It is happening. When you have the head of your Homeland Security stand up and say that we are a Muslim nation, that's big news. And then when you have a president who stands before a Muslim group and say we are no longer Christian, that's big news.
And that the founder before we really see.
Right, so we're seeing it, it's happening so very quickly, and the Lord said that just before He come, that it would happen like a woman giving birth to a child, and it'll get more and more severe. You know, any of you ever given birth, gets more and more severe and closer together until the child is born. So it's like watching the world in labor. And the Lord is about to come. The Lord is about to come, and that's what He wanted us to see. But we see that Israel is at war. Now, let's also remember this. As much as we love Israel, Israel is at home, like God said. But she's at home in unbelief, like God said. But that does not annul where God said, I will bless them who bless you and curse them who curse you, who curse you, Israel. And that God has a plan for Israel, and how sad it is that our countries, not our country, our people are still standing with Israel. In fact, there were 2 votes, which was good news for America this week. The one, well, actually they were both in the UN, to stop America and to stop Israel. And thank God, America still has one of the 5 votes of veto in the UN. There's 5 permanent nations who have the right to veto an article to keep it going before the UN to vote. I don't know if you knew that or not.
No.
But of those 5, the United States is one of them. But little sad news, Russia, China, okay, and what is the other one? France, and then the other one is the United Kingdom. Those are 5 permanent members of the voters who will say what will go before the UN, what won't. And if they veto it, then it doesn't go before the UN for a vote. So that's how the UN works. And by the way, if it goes before the UN for a vote, we will definitely lose. Because they did have a vote last week, and it was 29 to 1 to come down on Israel, and we were the only one that said no. So that's a good thing. Another good thing for America is that we did vote to give them the money, Israel, the money that they needed, and told them that they could get into the missiles and things that's stored over there in Israel already. We have missiles stored over there in Israel, but it's under the United States authority. So Israel wouldn't touch them. Now, if they was a terrorist group, they'd done had it. They wouldn't touch it without permission. So they asked for permission, and the United States gave them permission. Now, here's the problem in this country. The Lord said that a house divided against itself will fall. This is the most divided this country has ever been. It's never been divided like this since the Civil War. And what's really sad is that our government is divided. Our people stand for Israel, the majority. The administration does not. Even though they speak it, by their actions we see that they don't. The world sees that.
Right.
Yes.
Okay? Especially the Middle East. And Israel sees that, but Israel knows that the majority of the people still stand for Israel, which is good, which is good. But here's the problem. Satan is spinning it, and many of the churches are now teaching that Israel is no longer Israel, that Israel is the church. In fact, the USA Presbyterian Church just voted that last month, that Israel is not Israel, that Israel is the church. And then the Catholic Church also teaches that, but they've been teaching that for years and years and years. And what they have done is the new Bibles that they're printing, Israel will be replaced with the word church, and Jerusalem will be replaced with the word heaven. So some of the newer Bibles will be looking for that, so we can bring it in and show it to you. So it's happening so quickly, that replacement theology, and right now is when it will be so dangerous. Because the people are saying, but, you know, look at all the people they're killing. We're going to look at this here in just a minute. Yeah. And what is that? Did anybody hear the interview of the son of the Hamas leader? Wasn't that something? To hear him, I mean, can you imagine the contract that's out on his life? He said he changed from one Middle East ruler to another one whose name is Jesus Christ. He became a Christian.
Woo!
And he has written a book. I'm trying to get my hands on that book. But he's written a book on the founding of Hamas. And his father, he is the eldest son, and he helped his father form the Hamas. Yes, he helped them form the Hamas, the terrorist group that's causing so much trouble. And I listened to his testimony, but I also listened to him say that Hamas will never settle for peace because Hamas does not want peace. Hamas wants all Jews killed, and he said that they are willing, his father, okay, his father who founded it said they are willing to sacrifice every man, woman, and child of the Palestinians, and their plan is to stack up the bodies of the innocent, to film it, and to turn the world influence against Israel. And this is what's happening.
Indeed. Yeah, that's the plan.
Now, before he said that, God said it.
Right.
Okay? It's in this book that this would happen. And he names the organization, Psalms 83, Ezekiel 39. He names them, and I've given you a lot of scripture in these papers today. And I want you to check these scriptures. Now, is the world going to end? No. And this is why a word study is so important, because you can go through the New Testament and you can find all these scriptures that say the world will be at the end of the world. But if you use your Strong's or your biblical dictionary, you'll find that there's two words for world. One is aeon, which speaks of the ages, because there's different ages. And then one is cosmos, which speaks of the world. And if you read the verse and find out which word for world means there, then you'll realize the world is never coming to an end. Just different ages. But then God promises us in over 100 verses that there will always be a world, ages on end, and that the church will be in the heavens displayed for all the world to see forever and ever and ever. That's pretty good news.
Yeah.
That's pretty good news. His bride will be displayed in all her glory and beauty in the heavens for all to see forever and ever and ever. So the good news is things are right on time, just exactly the way God said. But if you go back and find out, where did this all begin? That's why you need to study the whole Bible, okay? Because you find out that these terrorists, most of which are Arabs, by the way, there's 3,000 Americans over there right now being trained with all the American credentials. They were born and raised here. And they're over there being trained right now to come back here and come back to Canada and be willing to give their life. Okay? So, but most of your terrorists are Arabs. They're just from different countries, different tribes, different denominations of one religion, Islam. It's kind of like you see the one religion, Christianity, and then all the different denominations. But you got your main, you got Catholic and Protestant. And they're all part of one or the other. So you can understand how this can happen. So if you look here on your notes, all terrorists are Muslims, but not all Muslims are terrorists. But if their leader stands up and says, Califonte, and they raise the black flag, they have to unite or they have to die.
Right.
Okay, you know, the Palestinians over there are really in bondage. Even though, you remember, we studied this not too long ago. In 2005, the United States kind of pressured Israel to give up the Gaza Strip.
Right.
And for it to be a demilitarized, there would be no military there.
Yeah, right.
And so they gave it up, and we watched them. We watched as the Jews cried and begged the Israeli soldiers not to move them off their homeland. And we watched the Israeli soldiers cry as they were moving their own people off their homeland for the name of peace and giving them the Gaza Strip. Now what happened? The Palestinians in the Gaza Strip voted in Hamas to lead them. And it's been nothing but war ever since. Ever since. and Hamas care nothing for those people. And see, it's hard for us, because being born and raised in America, you expect when your leaders stand up and speak, they're speaking the truth. You expect honor.
Right.
You expect if two people sign a peace treaty that their name is good. You remember a time when a shake hand meant
Yes.
something?
It was good enough.
Yeah, it was good enough. But we have to realize the world is not like that. And they lie. And our people lie.
Mhm.
Right in the face of the truth, they lie. They're right in plain sight. They're doing things that we say, oh, they can't do that because that's against our Constitution. How many things have they done against the Constitution in the last 3 years? Just the last 3 years. That would be a list to compile. Because it's becoming a joke to the rest of the world. Okay? So we need to understand that all terrorists are Muslims, but not all Muslims are terrorists. Okay? So some of them are actually have committed themselves to Christ, but are afraid to speak up in fear of death. And the ones who were cast out of Mosul or Nineveh, which is easier to say, Nineveh last Saturday, the ones who were left in the hospitals, they had to recant Christ or die right there in the hospital.
Yeah.
And they had to say that they'd be a Muslim. So it's a terrifying world. Thank God for the United States, because it's still the most wonderful country in the world. But we need to realize we're losing our freedoms. It's happening very quick. So if you look at this paper, Islam was founded in the year 600. It's in 600s that Islam was founded by a man, by Muhammad. We're not going to go into all of that. Their prophet, and they chose the god Allah, which is the moon god. Of 300, they were worshiping 365 gods, and he chose Allah as the God of gods. Okay? So not all Palestinian people are Muslim. Some are actually Catholic. Okay? And some are Christian, but the majority of the Palestinian people are Muslim. And the majority of the Palestinian people are Arab. Now let's look at this. All descendants are of Abraham. Okay? They're all of Abraham. And God said they would all live among themselves and hate each other. And fight each other. Even all these different groups of terrorists that's on the next page, they fight each other. They're all fighting each other. And we see the same thing with the denominations, don't we? We see the same thing. But all three faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Muslim or Islam, came from Abraham. God called out Abraham, we already know that, and promised him a seed that would be innumerable, should be innumerable, as the stars and the grains of sand. In other words, as many as there was stars, there would be Abraham's descendants. As many as grains of sand, they would be Abraham's descendants. But they would not all be Jews. And they would not all be covenant people. Which is very important, because it's the covenant people that he said, I will not break my covenant with you. No matter what happens, my covenant with you will stand. Okay? Well, we find out, we're not going to cover all of this, but because you already know that Ishmael was the first son born to Abram by the slave Hagar. And you find the Hagarines, named after Hagar, listed in Psalms 83 of the people who turn against Israel and say, let's wipe them off the face of the earth. Psalms 83, okay? The Hagarines from Hagar. Muhammad and Islam came from Ishmael. Think about this, all the way back 2,000 years before Christ. This has been happening. This has been a fight between Ishmael and Isaac, the son of Abraham, who are actually half-brothers. Okay? Ishmael said since he was born first, the land and all the promises, the birthright, it all belongs to the Arabs. Because God said of Ishmael there would be 12 princes, and they would be the Arab nations. But he also called Ishmael a wild ass. And if you study that and find out what that means, I mean, he explains it in the verse when he says, your hand will be against all your brothers. You you will hate everybody and fight everybody, okay? So Ishmael was the first son. He says it all belongs to us. So that's what they're fighting over, that piece of ground. That belongs to us. They're also fighting because Satan hates Israel. Did you ever ask yourself, how in the world could all the nations of the world turn against one little bitty state? I mean, you think about this. Look at Israel. Look how tiny Israel is, and all these nations, they're even just on that side of her, hate her and want her destroyed. That has to be supernatural. And it is. The Bible tells us in Chronicles, Satan hates Israel and came against Israel. Okay? Satan. But let's remember this. God loves Israel and has a plan for Israel. And who wins? God. Okay? God wins. So you have Ishmael, who is the father of the Egyptians, the Arabs, you know, the Hagarenes. Then you have Esau. You have Ishmael and Isaac. You have Esau and Jacob. Okay? The covenant went through Isaac and then Jacob and his 12 sons. But these, Esau, who gave up his birthright, and he is the father of the Palestinians. And they have a homeland. God gave them Jordan. They're actually Jordanians. They're Edomites. They settled in Petra. That was their home. Okay? So we see how all this fighting began all those thousands of years ago and is continuing today. And who's behind it? Satan. Because he put it in the heart of Ishmael, put it in the heart of Esau to destroy Isaac, to destroy Jacob, and get rid of and say. In fact, even their writings to this day, the Muslim writings, they just replace Isaac and actually even Jesus Christ with Ishmael. But they replace Isaac with Ishmael. So they tell some of the same stories, but they change the name. So people go, oh wow. Well, then you have your world today, especially the ones who are being educated, who are saying, you know, I'm so tired of religion. Who do you know is right? Look how close they are. They all got a Messiah. They're all fighting each other. How easy it is to get them to say, we don't want any part of it. But here's the problem. Satan is behind that, and he classifies all, even Christians, as religion. So they're saying we're too smart to fall for this stuff. And so now our universities are actually becoming anti-Semitic. Because they watch the news. And they say that one little nation is just causing trouble in all the rest of the world. So you're going to not buy anything from them. And they're trying to destroy Israel economically. But here we have the Hamas piling up the bodies. And yeah, I watch that. I see those children and I cry. I see the faces of my grandchildren. And I cry. But it's not Israel doing that. When we sent them, and we sent them the mortar, we sent them the cement, we sent them the lumber, we sent them all of these building supplies, plus several $billions to build in the Gaza Strip, to build hospitals and schools and places for people to live. And what did they do? They gave that, or Hamas took it, and they built tunnels, tunneling underground from Egypt through Gaza Strip into Israel. Wow. And the tunnels are underneath their schools and their hospitals. So what did they have to do? Now, is that new? Do you remember in the Old Testament, the ancient Persians, and that's Iran? That's who Hamas is part of? Actually, Hamas is the Muslim Brotherhood, but Iran supports them. You remember them digging underneath the city of Babylon? And going underneath the city while Belshazzar was having his party and reading the handwriting on the wall? Nothing is new under the sun. It's their culture. So they dug these tunnels like groundhogs or rats. And the missiles and everything they need are carried through these tunnels. So these tunnels have to be destroyed. They have to be destroyed. And this is what Israel's saying. We want to destroy the tunnels. We'll have a ceasefire, but we're going to destroy the tunnels. But see, the son of the Hamas said they don't want a ceasefire. They want death to Israel. We find that in the Bible. That's one. So you see, the Muslims teach the scriptures, which name Isaac. They say the scriptures were all corrupted. They were all corrupted, and that actually the scriptures speak of Ishmael. And so when you have the world's opinion against Israel, and you have your churches who are turning against Israel, and saying that they're Israel, you can see how the whole world. But what did God say? He said, I will bring all the nations down against Israel. And then he said in Zechariah, I will destroy every nation that comes against Israel. And he says, all nations will come against Israel. And we're watching this come to pass. Look at the next page. So God said of Ishmael, his people would wander in the desert and hate everyone, even fight each other. And that's what they do. God said this in Genesis 16:12, and he will be a wild man. He was talking to Hagar. He will be a wild man, which means wild ass, and which means he would be untamable and stubborn. Okay? He would be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. And who are these people? These are the Arabs. These are Islam. Okay. So Islam, as we said, was founded by Muhammad in the 600s. And then look at the denominations. Look underneath this list, and I'll probably give you a few that's not on your list. But you have the two division. What a simple reason to divide one huge nation like the Arab nation, the Islam. They divided over, when Muhammad died, who would rule next. Would it be a direct descendant of Muhammad or someone voted in? And they split over that. That's what all the split was over that. And you see here, the denomination or sects, they rule over most of the Palestinians in various countries. And they're all Muslim, and they believe in Sharia law. I don't know if you heard this or not. I think it was 2 weeks ago in Philadelphia, Overbrook, Philadelphia. There's a huge Muslim mosque there. And the emir and his sidekick caught a man stealing. And so they took him behind the mosque and tried to cut off his hand under Sharia law.
Oh, wow.
And they Overbrook, Philadelphia. And what they did, they used a rusty old machete, which was dull. Which didn't cut the hand completely off, but cut through the tendons and broke the bone. So they got him to the hospital and they arrested the emir. And he's now in prison. Now what's going to happen there, I don't know, because let me tell you what they're using. They're using their right to religion according to our Constitution to be able to carry out their laws as they see fit.
Wow.
Yeah. Philadelphia, Overbrook. Look it up. Look it up. Okay? So the denominations were divided, Sunni and Shiite. Now the largest group is 90%. Actually, in all reality, they would be 83% because there's a tiny little group, okay, in which Assad in Syria leads, who are 3%. So you have really three groups. You have that tiny little 3% of Assad in Syria. And by the way, the ISIS has taken over part of Syria. The ISIS who cast out all the Christians. Okay? So you have your Sunnis, which is the biggest group, and you have your Shiites, which is the smaller group, only 10%. But what's interesting is the 10% of the Shiite, which is Iran and Iraq, they're the ones who are becoming nuclear powered, and they want to destroy the Sunnis. Okay? And their belief is if they cause worldwide chaos, that it will bring their Yeah, they're a Mahdi or their Messiah up out of the well to take over the whole world, and that it would be an Islamic world, and anyone, and actually they teach that Jesus Christ is coming back and will say that it was all a lie, he didn't die on the cross, and will say that he has become a Muslim and will kill any Christian who will not denounce the cross and become a Muslim. That is their doctrine. Okay? It is. That's their doctrine. And they're saying, so we have to kill as many Sunnis as we have to. We have to kill each other. But that is fulfilling what God said they would be doing. That their hand would be against each other, their own brothers, and want to kill them all. We're seeing it come to pass. Now, of these two divisions, there are 49 terrorist groups. Okay? Well, of the two divisions of Christianity, you have Catholic and Protestant. How many denominations are there? 42,000. New ones being formed all the time. Okay? Now look at these groups. You have Hamas. Okay, that's a Muslim Brotherhood. That's a Sunnite. You have them out of Egypt, and right now they're all over the Gaza Strip. The Muslim Brotherhood, that's Egypt. But really they cast him out, remember? We watched that take place. But still, there's some of them in Egypt, and they're helping Iran to get the missiles to the ones who are in the Gaza Strip. Do you see how it's falling in place? Okay. And I keep seeing those Israeli soldiers crying as they move out their own people off their own land. Okay? You have the Hezbollah, which is the Shiites. Okay? They're Lebanon. You have the Abbas. Now this is what will help you when you hear the news to realize these are all terrorist groups, and they're all supposed to be under the PLO that Arafat formed. Okay? He formed the Palestinian Liberation Movement, and now our people are calling them freedom fighters. They're terrorists. And they announced this last week, no more two-state. We won't settle for two-state now. We want the Jews gone. Well, God wasn't going to settle for two-state to begin with. And he said in Joel chapter 3, don't divide my land. Wow, just to watch it happen. So you have the Hamas, you have the Muslim Brotherhood, you have Hezbollah, you have the Abbas, I'll call them Arafat's posse. You have the Al-Qaeda, which are Sunni. I've listed which ones these are. They're the ones who are very strict with the Sharia law. That's Afghanistan. Okay? Then you have Osama bin Laden. Do you all remember him? He was the head of the Taliban, which is really not there anymore. Yeah, it is. And that's Pakistan. And guess what Pakistan has that the rest of the Middle East don't have, except for Israel? They have nuclear weapons. That's right. Then you have the Fatah. That's the PLO, also founded by Arafat. So they keep changing the names, but there's 49 terrorist groups living in all these Middle East countries, and most of them are fighting each other. But what they're now saying is this: let's unite for one common goal, to wipe out Israel and America. Let's always include America there, because that's their second target. Let's wipe out Israel. If we can just unite for a while, and then we'll settle the differences later. Now, what is the church saying in America? Let's drop the doctrines, put aside the things that divide, and let's unite for the common good of everybody, and form a one-world church. What are the Muslims saying? Let's form a one-world global church. Muslim. And anyone who doesn't agree are haters, and we'll kill them. What is America saying? Literally saying. Do you understand where we are? Why has God chosen us as that generation? He wants us to witness. He wants us to tell the truth. He wants us to stand on the truth. We might fight a few battles here in the next couple of years. We might, and guess what? We deserve that. For permitting, we laid down the gauntlet, people. I'm not saying each individual, but as a country, we've rejected God. We've rejected God's word. We've allowed the homosexual marriage. We've allowed the killing of the innocent babies. Millions and millions and millions of innocent blood. The very things that God said was an abomination unto him. The very things that he judged Israel for and is judging Israel for now. And we think as Americans, oh, that couldn't happen to us. There's no way that could happen to us. Why? God said he's no respecter of persons and we're not his little pet. Okay? So we have all these different groups. Listen, there's 220,000 missiles pointed at Israel right now. And if they all became one, but see, they have the Iron Dome, by the way, which a Jew founded. It was a Jew who created the Iron Dome. They showed him on TV a few days ago.
Wow.
In fact, all the weapons of mass destruction were created by Jews. I have the whole list of them in the back of my Bible, the year they were founded and who founded them. Okay? There's a reason for that. The ISIS, and I had a misprint there, that should be ISIS, not ISIL, is the most brutal of all terrorists. God lists these. They're in Psalms 83. They're in Ezekiel 38 and 39. They're listed in your scriptures of being the nations that will join together at the end and try and destroy Israel. But good news. God says when they all join together and come down across Israel, he said he's coming and he's going to bring his church with him. So that means what? We have to be there.
Amen.
To come back with him. Okay? So we will be raptured before the tribulation, and at the end of the tribulation, when they all come down upon Israel at the Battle of Armageddon, which is a word I'm hearing over the news worldwide. But see, if the rapture happened today, Armageddon won't happen for 7 years. So if we're watching it all come together, when we look at Russia and China becoming friends, and we see that in Daniel chapter 11, the north and the east coming against the Antichrist from the west. We're seeing it all fall into place. Even Russia and China are forming their own bank to destroy America economically. This is news. This is the Bible being fulfilled. We see this. ISIS is the most brutal of all terrorists. Just taking part of Iraq and part of Syria. Now, are the Muslims happy about that? No. Remember, they're fighting each other. They're fighting each other. And it says they're establishing what they call Islamic State. And they've already voted in their caliph. And they put him on his throne, and they're calling for all Muslims to raise the black flag, obey their leader, unite and destroy Israel, and then enforce Sharia law all over the land. These are Sunnites. Remember, two groups, Shiites and Sunnites. The Sunnites are the ones that are so terrible. Okay? And remember, we said last week, they cast out all the Christians from Mosul, which is Nineveh. Look at the next note. All Muslims, all with one goal, to destroy Israel. Okay? Now, are all Muslims wanting to destroy Israel? No. We have some Muslims in this country who don't want to destroy Israel. But the thing is this. If they form their caliph and they form one nation, the Muslims who say no to it will die just as sure as the Christians who will not conform. So they're under bondage as well. And if they don't serve their leader, they will die. Think about that boy. He's a young man. and his father is the head of Hamas. Can you imagine? Do you know that the Homeland Security is trying to get him deported back to his country because he's a danger?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Why? He's telling the truth. He's telling the truth, and Homeland Security is trying to have him deported. He's fighting them, plus fighting for his life because he became a Christian, and it's telling the truth. Wow, we need to pray for him. We need to pray for him. I get that book and read it. I'll pass it around. What's the name of the book? It's The Son of Hamas is the name of the book. The Son of Hamas. So, what are the goals? To destroy Israel. We find it in Psalms 83. Now look at the bottom of the page, or your next page. It says in Psalms 83, let me read it. He's speaking to God. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people. They have consulted against thy hidden ones. He's talking about Israel. They have said, come, and let us cut them off from being a nation. Is that not what they're saying? Come, let us cut them off from being a nation. That the name of Israel, just in case you don't understand who he's talking about, the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. You wonder if they're going to come together? Let me read that again. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. And God calls them his enemy. See, God doesn't have any enemy. Yeah, by the way, before you were saved, you're God's enemy. According to Ephesians chapter 2. Okay? Now let's look at the UN report. And let's see how Satan spins things. Isn't it interesting the way Satan spins things? We're watching this. He just keeps spinning this, and spinning this, and spinning, and actually using scriptures against us by reinterpreting them. Instead of reading them for what they say. The same thing's happening to our Constitution. Okay? It's being reinterpreted. This is not what they really meant. This is what they meant to say. That's what some of the newer Bibles are saying. That's not what God really meant. This is what God really meant. I think God knows what it meant. Look what the UN says. UN reports. June 16th. Report from the United Nations. The Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, this is page 5, issued report that Israel delivered messages, text, phone calls, and leaflets to virtually all residents of Hamas, civilians in all neighborhoods, telling them to leave their homes to safety before 8 a.m. This is a UN report, okay? July 16th, this month. They sent drones into neighborhoods to warn the people as well to leave and to see if they had left. Okay? But what happened? Subsequently, the Palestinian Ministry of Interior in Gaza instructed the people, in other words, the Hamas, instructed the people not to leave. They were not to flee the area. And so they started moving their missiles into the churches, and moving their missiles into the hospitals, and moving their missiles into the schools, and then filling them with innocent women and children, and killing them. Literally, they were killing them, not Israel. Okay? Now this is a UN report. The very UN who voted against them this week. Now look what it says. Subsequently, they told them, don't leave. So the vast majority of them decided to stay, some by force, and they died. Okay. Then the UN made this statement, and I thought it was very interesting. They said, Israel has kept all the rules of the Geneva Convention. Do you know there's rules of war? Yeah. Because at one time, there were honorable people on all sides.
Right.
But listen. Subsequently, the Palestinians' Minister of Interior told them to stay. And the UN said, Israel has kept all the Geneva Convention. And then some. But the Hamas has violated it. Even every rule forbidding the Palestinians to leave. UN stated that the terrorist Hamas, they called them terrorists, directed civilians to shield military objects. from attacks, using their own bodies as shields in schools, and children cheered them on as they were being blown up. They built their war machine in the midst of the residential areas. What kind of people do that? On purpose to pile up the bodies so the world will condemn Israel. On this note, the UN went in and found missiles in their schools and hospitals and asked the terrorists to remove them. I told you that last week. The terrorists refused to remove them. So the UN removed them and gave them to the terrorists. Okay. July 18th, 2 days later, listen, 2 days later, the UN, United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry made this statement. Although Israel has a right of self-defense in theory, Israel ought to be prevented from exercising this right in practice. Is that what they call an oxymoron?
And what did Netanyahu tell John Kerry?
And this was their, and I quote, although Israel has a right of self-defense in theory, only in theory, Israel ought to be prevented from exercising this right in practice. That was 2 days later. Then 2 days later, again, the UN made this statement. Dozen more civilians, including children, have been killed in Israeli military strikes. I condemn this atrocious action. Israel must exercise maximum restraint and do far more to protect the civilians. Not one word against the Hamas. Are you watching the news?
Yes.
Are you listening to Satan working through the leaders of the countries? And what did God say in Daniel chapter 10? That the leaders of the Gentile world powers, most of them are ruled by demonic powers that have been assigned to them.
Right.
Daniel chapter 10. And then what did he say in Corinthians? About Satan presenting himself as an angel of light and his demons as ministers of righteousness. People, we need to wake up and be aware of what's going on in this world. Okay? But people say, I don't want to know that. It's going to mess up my day. Lord help us. Lord help us. CNN asked Netanyahu, listen to this, about the civilian casualties, and he said, we use missiles to defend our people, and they use people to defend their missiles. Israel is trying to be as pinpointed as we can, trying not to endanger civilians. Secretary of State, who was present, was caught on camera talking to the aide, blasting Israel, and said, it's a hell of a pinpoint operation if you ask me. He had no idea the mic was on.
I bet he did.
Speaking again out of both sides of his mouth. Kerry was in Egypt trying to bring about a ceasefire, which Israel openly rejected, for it was all one-sided. And then what did he do? He went to France and met with Qatar, and I forget who the other one was. They met together and formed another agreement, which was totally on the side of Hamas. And Israel said, no way.
Yeah.
No way. So then when Israel did say, okay, we're going to have a 72-hour where they can get their dead, they can go back to their homes, they can get food, and by the way, Israel sent food, water, and supplies to them.
We didn't hear that.
No. Food, water, and supplies to them. And then said 72 hours you have to gather up your sick and your dead and your food and your water and go to safety. 90 minutes later, Hamas bombed them. Why? The son of Hamas said they don't want peace. They want Israel wiped out, and then America. Then America. So what happened? Look at your next page. We're going to have to stop here. Israel has uncovered and blown up some 16 of the 31 tunnels. I think the last count was 16. They have to blow up those tunnels. They have to. Okay? They have to. They would be willing to broker a peace agreement if they can continue into Gaza and destroy all the tunnels and the missiles. Just let us do that. We don't want to kill innocent people. Let us do that. Listen, the women and children may be innocent. And a lot of the men may have been forced into doing what they're doing. But remember this, 2005, they voted in Hamas.
Right.
And remember this, God allows leaders leaders to be put in offices for his own purposes. He tells us in the Old Testament and New Testament, I put them in, I take them out. Let's remember who's in control. God is in control. They think they're doing all this. God is permitting it for a purpose. What? He has a grander plan. He has a grander plan. He's still on the throne. He's not going to destroy the world. The Bible says this age will come to an end. Then the next age will begin. Then there's the eternal age. The age of the church is about to come to an end.
Amen.
Because he's going to rescue us.
Amen.
Yes. And then the tribulation. And then the age of the kingdom. But it will also come to an end at the end of the 1,000 years. And then the earth will be purged and burned. And then there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. And the eternal ages will go on and on and on and on and on. We're going to be there forever if you have received Christ. If you haven't, you will be in hell, burning forever and ever and ever. Because he created those to be eternal. Your soul is eternal. And it will spend one eternity, one place or the other. One place or the other. Wow, I didn't think.
Wow.
I'm sorry we didn't get through this. Maybe we will try and we only have a couple more pages. So take these pages home and read them. Read them. They are taken right out of the news and right out of the Bible. And I have put your verses on page 8 and page 7. But let me read one verse in Obadiah 1, verse 18. It says, it's on page 7. And the house of Jacob shall be on fire. That's Israel. And the house of Joseph, a flame. And the house of Esau, that's the Palestinians, for stubble. And they shall kindle in them and devour them. And there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau. For the Lord hath spoken it. Israel and the Middle East are on fire, just like God said they would be. Just like God said they would be. He said, I will curse them who curse you, bless them who bless you. He said, I will never break my covenant with Israel, no matter what. And listen, if God broke his covenant with Israel, we don't have a chance in the world. Because if God breaks his word there, then his word means absolutely nothing. His plan for Israel is just as sure as his plan for us. And we need to remember that. God doesn't lie, and God doesn't change. And God is still God.
Amen.
Okay. God bless you. I'll try and get you